Happy Thursday, everybody. Thanks for joining us. I'm Titus. I'm the VP of Go-to-Market at Civic. I'm the host of the Tokenized Identity podcast. Here we discuss like the latest and the greatest happening at the intersection of digital identity and blockchain. Now, if you haven't done it already, like hit the like button, use the subscribe button on YouTube, follow us on X, LinkedIn, your favorite podcasting platform where you stay up to date with episodes. This really helps us grow. Now, before we begin, I always share a little bit about Civic for those who are new. We're a digital identity platform that provides builders with tools to prevent bot attacks, Sybil attacks, and to enforce identity-related restrictions. We do that by tokenizing stuff like CAPTCHA, uniqueness, identity verification, and you can even bring compliance rules on chain with our technology while preserving user privacy. Now, today, we're going to talk about the world of permissioned and permissionless assets on Solana. When builders need to move the dial towards like adding restrictions to comply with real world regulations, and how this can bring more Web2 people and businesses into Web3. Now we have with us Austin Federa, Head of Strategy at Solana Foundation. Austin, please introduce yourself. Thank you for being on the pod.
Hey, yeah, thanks for having me on. Great to be here today. Yeah, I've spent the last almost 4 years building in the Solana ecosystem, first at Solana Labs and now at Solana Foundation. And so been really great to see the community and the builder network really grow and expand over time. It's been a wild ride, I would say, the last 4 years for the network, but one of the things that just like keeps me going every day and it's just so awesome to see is just the community growing, more builders coming on board, building, and really products that are getting built on the network using things like token extensions that really can't be built anywhere else on fully native, permissionless, decentralized blockchains like Solana.
Very cool, very cool. We're excited to have you here. So tell us a bit more about the Solana ecosystem. What's happening right now? What are you guys hyped about? What's the name of the game?
Sure. So, just for folks who may not be super familiar with Solana, it's a global permissionless layer one network run by about 1,600 different validators all around the world. It's run in I think over 350 data centers, plus a lot of individuals run validators themselves if they have sufficient internet connections for it. And so the network really has seen a massive influx of builders. I would say that Solana is probably the number two builder ecosystem behind the Ethereum ecosystem, which is quite an accomplishment. I would say over for a network that is just over 4 years old. The network went live in March of 2020, and so one of the characteristics we see on Solana is that builders are really making use of some of the unique features of the network. Right when Solana started, it was really the only network at the time that was focused on fast transactions, high transaction capacity, very low transaction fees, all within one global state machine. And so this was a very different architecture than sort of the sharded architectures that were very popular at the time, or sort of the fractal scaling architectures of layer twos and rollups and layer threes and layer 47s. And so I think what we see now is like the market has kind of adjusted back. You see a lot of these chains that we're previously talking about as modular, sovereign deployable chains, coming back and talking about themselves now as integrated experiences. And the sort of super app thesis is an integrated experience thesis. And so it's one of those things where the vision of Solana, which really comes from the founding engineers, which I'm obviously not either an engineer or a founder, but that founding engineer vision for the network really was to build a network capable of supporting the world's existing traditional financial markets. And to do that, you need really fast transaction capacity. You need low latency on transaction confirmation, right? People don't realize that most of the orders that go into like a TradFi market are cancel orders, right? They're people saying, "Oh, the market's moved. I no longer want to do what I previously wanted to do." And you need one global state to make this possible. You need incredibly fast decentralized infrastructure to make this possible. And that's downstream of all the products we see built on Solana today. Now, it turns out that when you make a chain that's super fast and really DeFi optimized and really built at the low level to be as performant as possible, and I guess you should say by DeFi optimized, we don't mean like there's no CLOBs built in at the base layer. There's not a proof of liquidity system like some other chains have started to do. It's just all the characteristics of a high performance network make it very good for DeFi. Turns out it's great for NFTs. It's great for meme coins. It's great for real world assets. It's great for social protocols built on chain. And so, that really is the focus and mission of the Solana Foundation, is to support the advancement, adoption, security, and decentralization of the network. And most of the work we do from a funding perspective and a building perspective is focused on that really low level infrastructure, the sort of investments that, companies building on the network maybe don't have direct economic reasons to build themselves. But these projects like Firedancer and changing the entire network architecture over from a networking technology standpoint, from raw UDP to Quick to this new STL project, is all really designed to make those low level investments that say, we don't really know what builders are going to build if we 10x the capacity and throughput of the Solana network, but we know it's going to be interesting, right? Every time you have an order of magnitude reduction in fees or an order of magnitude increase in available bandwidth, you get totally new types and products and services that no one really could have imagined beforehand. I think it's hard to go back to 2008 when Steve Jobs is standing on stage holding up an iPhone and be like, this will change the way the internet dates. This is going to fundamentally disrupt dating. No one thought that at the time, but smartphone based dating apps are now how the vast majority of people meet their future spouses.
Yeah, definitely. And you mentioned Firedancer. So for those who don't know, can you give a quick overview of what it is and why is it important to the ecosystem?
Yeah, so I'm going to start with the concept of the validator client and then get into Firedancer. So one of the things that the Ethereum ecosystem has done incredibly well is a robust and sort of diverse collection of different validator clients running on different software stacks. And so a validator client is just the software you download on your computer to run a validator, right? To validate blocks, to join, to participate in the network. This is something that, as I mentioned, there's over I think 1,600 consensus block building validators out there. There's about the same number of RPCs. So there's about 3,000 validators around the world today on Solana. Today, they all run the Agave validator client, which is built by Anza, which is the engineering team from Solana Labs previously. And even if they're running the Jito client, which is an MEV optimized client, under the hood, Jito is 90% of the code base is the Agave code base. This is true on every network today except Bitcoin and Ethereum. And so Firedancer is a net new validator client built in a different language, right? The Agave client is built in Rust. The Firedancer client is primarily built in C. And so there's two components of this project. The first is sort of the boring one, right? It's safety and security. It's that if you have two different code bases implementing the same protocol spec, it's very unlikely that the same bug will exist in both pieces of code at the same time when they don't share the same libraries and the same dependency trees. This is pretty much when you look at different validator clients on Ethereum, they're all basically doing the same thing at exactly the same speed, but they're doing it with different code bases. And that provides a certain level of resiliency and a certain level of decentralization and a certain level of security. On Solana, though, Firedancer is also trying to do one other thing. It's trying to 100x the throughput of the network over the next 2 years. And that's because, they're starting from scratch. They know the spec of Solana today, and so they can write much more optimized code to serve that problem. Plus, C is a very fast and efficient programming language to be able to do this in. And so, what we expect to see over the next, let's call it 6 months after Firedancer launches, is a steady increase in the transaction capacity of the network. Compute limits start being raised. And the goal again in the next 2 years is to 100x the performance of the network. Now, we're not going to see that on day one, right? Successful day one launch of a second client is no one notices, right? But then slowly you start to expand capacity of the network. We start to be able to start, running things through governance proposals to increase the compute size of the network, to, maybe shorten block times. All sorts of types of interesting activities happen there that can take the network from the roughly 4,000 transactions per second in steady state today to a future where we're pushing 400,000 transactions or more through the network.
Yeah, it's exciting to hear, and I'm sure a lot of the builders out there are rooting for those upgrades. So let's move a little bit upstream and from the depths of infrastructure to talk about projects. So I mentioned the Renaissance Hackathon. Sounds like that was an amazing success with over 8,000 participants, 95 countries. Do you have any favorite projects that you saw there?
I don't really, I don't know if I'm really allowed to say favorite projects. We love all the projects equally. But what I'll say is the hackathons have been the lifeblood of the Solana ecosystem. The first hackathon I think was run in fall of 2020 by Matt Taylor, who has actually since spun out and launched a group called Coliseum, which is, a hackathon producing organization, which still produces all the Solana hackathons, but they also run an accelerator and an incubator and a bunch of other sort of after hackathon services as well now, which is really awesome to see. The hackathons are this sort of like moment where people who have ideas or they have some early code they've been working on, they just like dig deep for 2 months and really try and get that product shipped and launched. There's been, I think, over $100 million invested in companies through the Solana hackathons just directly. So it's an area where VCs are always paying attention. Some of the best projects on Solana have come out of the hackathons. And that for me is like one of the coolest things that, we get to do every quarter. And, I get to judge these every once in a while is actually, sit down and actually look at all these amazing projects that are getting built on the network. So Renaissance was, I think, the one of the last hackathons that we did. There's a new one that's coming up too from Coliseum, I think in Q3 or Q4. So yeah, check that out too. It's always kind of a wild ride to see. I mean, one of the things that's a bit different about Solana hackathons is they're not necessarily like a lot of hackathons are like, oh, we're going to spend a week working on this thing. This is like build a project, right? Build something that's actually user facing, build something that is like production ready. The standards are much higher than you see in a lot of other hackathons, and it's been a real benefit for everyone building on the network.
Yeah, and you can see that in the demos every time I attend, like either a hacker house or like something that's like really well put together. I'm like, yeah, that's not the usual 2-day weekend hackathon, sleep for like 2 hours and ship something. No, it's like much more well thought out. So I
Totally.
appreciate it. Yeah. All right. On the other side of the spectrum, so you guys have brought in some pretty interesting names recently. There's some deals that I saw come live with like PayPal, Visa, Stripe, WorldPay. Uh, what does that mean for the ecosystem? What does that mean for Solana?
Yeah, if I could go back to sort of 2022, there's a real tendency in the industry to pay for deals, right? And to pay large amounts of money for things that weren't really on chain and weren't really reputable, pilots. I think and there's a lot of those that, people sort of say Solana lost. And the answer is we really just didn't participate in them because when we looked at these things, we were like, there's very little substance there. And so, something like Visa is what I would say is like one of the, BlackRock also falls into this category. Visa and BlackRock. BlackRock is, of course, not yet building on Solana. But these fall into the category of like companies that looked at blockchain and said, this can solve a problem. I can build a real product here, and no one needs to pay me $20 million to do that. Right. And so if you look at Visa, they spent, years going through and doing technical diligence on a number of different chains. They originally started their USDC settlement pilot on Ethereum, and they chose to sort of scale that out with Solana in large part because of the transaction fees and the ecosystem that exists today. But those type of deals and relationships are not usually commercial term based. They're not really monetary based in that sense. They're based on, what problems can this technology solve for us that helps us experiment and improve our business. And so, seeing PayPal launch PYUSD on Solana, I think the supply as of 2 days ago, I haven't checked today, but the supply on Solana was higher than the supply on Ethereum. Now, those are both very small compared to Tether and USDC issuance, but it's really cool to see this sort of like, I would call it, more sort of institutional or traditional finance competition, both in the RWA space and the stablecoin space, really heating up. And one of the main components for PayPal was the existence of token extensions on Solana, which was a new framework that was launched at the beginning of the year. But it goes back to sort of 2 years of development by Solana Labs and Anza engineers to sort of make this thing possible. But it's a whole framework designed to build permissioned token experiences and give issuers more control over tokens while still keeping the base layer of the network decentralized and permissionless.
So since you brought the token extensions in the fold, might as well talk about them now. And I mean, I want to ask about token extensions in general, but also specifically transfer hooks. Like, how do they help builders? How do they help people like PayPal bringing in more permissioned assets into the fold?
Yeah, there's sort of, I would say, three approaches in blockchain to the sort of traditional space. There's the sort of Eric Voorhees maximalism of no compromises. We are building permissionless, libertarian, decentralized tools for the self-sovereign individual. And man, I love Eric Voorhees, but what we've seen is that the world is not moving in that direction anytime soon. I hope it does, but that is a 20-year long mission to change the relationship between people and their governments, their financial institutions. There's the second approach, which is full capitulation, which is saying we're launching a private L2, we're launching an L2 where we control all of the keys, all of the upgrade authority, we can rewind the chain in any minute, or we have fully KYC validators where you have to know us and you have to have, a relationship with the foundation or the founders before you're allowed to run a block builder on the network. I think that's very much the wrong approach. That feels to me like it's basically no different than the Federal Reserve, right? They run 9 different validators. They're just called Federal Reserve banks, right? And so at that point, you're not really getting the advantages of blockchain. And so token extensions was a project that was set out to do something in between. It was designed to acknowledge the practicality that we want to be able to build this stuff today on these type of networks. And issuers need to be able to comply with sanctions law. They need to be able to say that if, there's a wallet that holds, funds in it, and those funds have, helped, fund terrorism by Hamas or some other group, that, the PayPal needs to be able to reach into that wallet and freeze and seize those tokens. Now, freeze and seize authority is something that Tether and Circle actually have. Sorry, freeze authority is something that Tether and Circle have on the tokens they have issued, and we've seen them do that from various times. But freezing assets is not the same as seizing assets from a law perspective, right? Like the way that sanctions AML laws work, if someone is able to continue to deposit funds into an account that has been frozen, that is still not good, right? And so they consider seize authority to sort of be the holy grail here. And seize authority has not historically existed on blockchain. Now, these are scary words, right? I don't want someone reaching into my wallet and taking out, my meme coin or something like that. But in a stable coin, it's different, right? For a stable coin, you already are trusting that there's money in a bank held by a custodian somewhere. And, from that point of view, the relationship is a little bit different. So transfer hooks and allow when let me kind of walk through how they work. So when a transfer hook is called, so let's say I'm trying to send some PYUSD to you, there's actually a program called in the middle there that says, is this transfer allowed? And on something like PayPal, I don't believe they have actually transfer hook enforcement enabled yet. But you can sort of imagine 3 different types of transfer hook enforcement. One is, are you allowed to hold this wallet, this token? And the second is, are you disallowed? Right. So an allowable permission structure might say, I have to pass KYC before I can hold this token. And that's applicable to things like, let's say someone's tokenizing Tesla stock. There are legal requirements that the identity of every single holder of a security. And as much as we might want to get around that, we're not going to get around that. Anyone tokenizing stocks needs to know with absolute certainty whose wallet this is. And so the transfer hook can say, has this user passed KYC? Do they have a civic pass, for example, in the wallet that is asserted that they have passed KYC? Or there's the other model, which says, is this person on some sort of blacklist? Has this wallet address been flagged by TRM or Chainalysis or, one of these very reputable audit firms as being associated with or being directly responsible for terrorist funding, human trafficking, money laundering, whatever the sort of activity might be? And in that model, it's a deny function. And that's the sort of transfer hooks we're seeing on stablecoins, right? No stablecoin issuer is saying you must go through KYC to hold this stablecoin in the wallet. What they are saying, though, is if this wallet has been flagged by law enforcement as, a problem, you will not be able to transfer tokens into that wallet. And also, if they get a lawful court order that says, hey, this wallet, here's all the evidence, a judge has ruled that this is, a valid seize authority, the same way they do in the traditional banking system, they can reach into that wallet and remove those tokens. Now, again, this is scary, right? This is not how we think of these decentralized permissionless systems working, but what we're differentiating here is the base layer permissionless and the application layer as being permissionless. Usually we talk about these things as one thing, but we have permissioned experiences all the time. We have gated social experiences. We have whitelist tokens for NFT mints. We have early access for DeFi applications. We have all sorts of things where you can't do a certain action on a blockchain application unless there's something in your wallet or your wallet's been added to some type of list. Um, this is not antithetical to the vision and mission of blockchain. This is just one type of permission experience that may need to be built on top of it. There's also other ways you can think about this as being interesting and valuable. So let's say that I have purchased a bunch of tokenized treasuries from something like Etherfuse, um, and those use token extensions, and they have the ability to move them. And something unfortunate happens to me, and I die or I'm incapacitated. Etherfuse has the ability to comply with a court order that says I've read my will and my treasuries should go to my mom. And so they actually have the ability to reach into the wallet and transfer them even if the private key is lost. And let's be honest, that's going to be very necessary if we're going to have registered investment advisors actually building on-chain portfolios for people. You can't sort of have the answer be, look, like you should have kept your seed phrase better stored, right? That is an answer that works for all of us crypto native people. That is not an answer that works in the business world, right? And so that's kind of there's all of these types of experiences that are actually not crypto native experiences. They're TradFi native experiences. But if we build the infrastructure, or in this case, Anza and Solana Labs builds the infrastructure to be able to support these type of use cases, you slowly get people into the crypto way of thinking, right? You slowly get them into this place where they understand why self-sovereignty is important, why my keys, my crypto is the way it should be, right? Why they should be storing some of their net worth in Bitcoin, right? But it's a slow journey that makes it easier for people to start engaging with this stuff. And I think that's a really, really important thing to keep in mind. A lot of times people sort of are like 0 to 1, right? We want you to go from your Morgan Stanley account to holding everything in DeFi wallets and trading meme coins. And like, look, power to you if that's what you want to do. But most social change occurs with small steps. And I think it's really important to have a framework like token extensions that allows more people to experience the power, promise, and potential of blockchain without diving fully in necessarily.
And just to clarify for like the audience and for like kind of the current state, this like reaching in with a court order is only applicable for those tokens that use that type of token extension, those type of transfer hooks.
Exactly. And these things also can't be enabled after the fact. So if you want to have what's called permanent delegate authority, which is the ability to have seize authority, the developer, you as a developer, must enable it when you mint tokens. And so you can't add it later. And so everyone can see in an explorer or some wallets throw up warnings if this is the case. This is all fully transparent on chain, and is one of those things that like it's important to know that it happens, right? But this is sort of the same way that a DeFi protocol technically can rug, right? The founders have the upgrade keys to programs that exist. There's concerns there too. This is something similar in the sense of like you have to be aware of this when you're engaging with a token. But if you're engaging with USDC or USDT, you already are engaging, or any stable coin, really, you're already engaging in a form of custody risk anyway. And so I don't think these things are, and all RWAs, right? RWAs do not exist on chain. Every RWA by definition exists in the real world. I wish we'd stop calling them real world assets because it makes it sound like we're in some fantasy land. But off-chain assets, let's put it that way, right? If you are investing in a tokenized real estate offering of an apartment building, well, that apartment building better be there. And if it burns down in a fire, it doesn't really matter if you've got the tokens, right? You're going through TradFi insurance claims at that point anyway. And so I think this is sort of a really important mental jump for people to sort of keep in mind, is that anything that is off-chain assets are inherently off-chain. And so you can accept a little bit of a different risk model in terms of recourse there, as opposed to something like Bitcoin or Sol, where, like if there's a wrapped Bitcoin that has, transfer hooks applied to it, you should probably not use that, right? That's probably a bad use of the token extensions features, right? Because Bitcoin is meant to be permissionless and decentralized, and there should be no one in between you and that trading.
Well, I mean, there's also a little bit of drama happening now with the custodians of WBTC specifically on other chains. So
Yeah, I think we can sidestep that today. I don't
Yeah,
want to touch
yeah,
that.
yeah. it's probably like everyone should look at like whatever they're holding all the time because stuff may change in the background and we're not aware who's doing what.
Yeah, look, this is the biggest problem with Bitcoin today is that every solution has custody risk for Bitcoin that's not on Bitcoin. And that'll hopefully change. Like there's some BitVM projects and other kinds of like Bitcoin like programmability type systems on top of it. And there's groups like, Threshold, and there's some like Bitcoin token on ICP that does this too, that does like very good sharding of keys. But again, like sharding of keys is still a form of custody, right? One of the really cool things about, like wrapped ether or wrapped soul is that you're only trusting a computer program. You're not actually trusting people in the loop. And on most forms of BTC today that are not native to Bitcoin, pretty much every form of BTC not native to Bitcoin, there's humans in the loop somewhere. And humans are great, right? Love humans, but sometimes you just prefer to trust a computer
Yeah, or math, pure math
or math.
sometimes is better.
I mean,
Yeah,
math, computers are just math at the end of
yeah.
the day.
Ultimately it's a different interface, but yeah, so I think maybe because the space is like rather complicated for a majority of people, like do you have some advice for like builders navigating this like permissionless permission, like when to add permission, how to think about it, and also how to be transparent with their users, their customers, their community members when that's involved? I think that's one thing like people need to do better in our space.
I really wish there would be sort of an industry standard like nutrition fact type label when it comes to like humans in the loop, right? And trust systems and trust assumptions. It maybe Coin Center could build something like this. It could be very interesting. That sort of is like, hey, like here's this program. Here's what the developers have reported. Now, again, you're trusting the developers reported it correctly, but like at some points turtles all the way down and we're trusting Intel hasn't put a backdoor in the CPUs too, right? So like at some point you have to take the tinfoil hat off and accept that like humans built these systems, and so at some point down the line you are trusting a human. But it'd be really nice to see like, hey, like when you're engaging with this token, right? The contract has been frozen. Here's the token distribution. There's groups like RugCheck that do really good work on sort of some of those like on-chain analytics to say, is this token potentially a rug or not? But it'd be really nice for folks to say like, here's custody, right? If this is like WBTC, here's BitGo, here's BitGo's custody policy. And then it's very easy for folks to catch them as they change stuff if they're doing anything nefarious, or if not, just understand what the assumptions and safety risks are that they're going into this. Is this program governed by a multisig? Is this bridge governed by a multisig? Is this L2 governed by a multisig? These things should be in some sort of industry standardized format, so they're very easy to see. L2beat.info, I think is the website, has a very good sort of interface they've built for does this L2 have fraud proofs? Does this L2 have all these other types of things that you'd care about? I would love to see a version of that for DeFi, a version of that for RWAs. Like there's a lot of I think just good hygiene that like industry groups could do to help standardize this to make it easier for people to understand. But at the end of the day, the problem with those nutrition fact labels is Terra would have said good, good, good on everything. FTX would have said good, good, good on everything, right? Because they're self-reported at the end of the day. But self-reported systems are better than no systems. And so I think that's a good step in the right direction.
Oh yeah, and I think ultimately all of the kind of marketplaces and the tools that we use, like the wallets and whatnot, they need to also reflect those underlying like characteristics of an asset. If it requires KYC, if it's blocked in certain geographies, if it's unavailable for certain types of
Yeah.
users, if it's like checking for bots or symbols on a regular basis, and so on, right? If there's kind of all these safeguards in place, because right now, like if you have a transfer hook in place that's not supported by an exchange, it will just hard fail. Like it won't tell you
Yes.
why.
Right. And this is this is a process where like transfer hooks are require two transactions, right? You basically have to do the transfer and then invoke the transfer program. That's a UX thing, right? Wallets can very easily just build it in as a bundle. But this is always sort of the technology curve, which I find is so funny. Is like the hard tech is always at least 2 years ahead of the UX, without fail, right? I mean, look at blinks and actions on Solana. Blinks and actions on Solana were fundamentally built in 2022 as part of Solana Pay. That core tech that makes blinks and actions possible was basically the transaction request feature in Solana Pay. But it took 2 years of people being like, what can we do with this to actually come up with this cool framework of blinks and actions? And I think transfer hooks are, probably on a similar, hopefully not 2-year trajectory, but this stuff shipped on chain in January of this year. And it really is just in the last few months that it's gotten critical adoption from explorers, dApps, wallets, RPC providers, all these sorts of like other types of applications. But now we're seeing like there's a large hedge fund that launched a fund on Solana through Libre Capital. There's Etherfuse using these. Baxis just upgraded all of their tokenized whiskey marketplaces to be using token extensions. You guys have built this cool on-chain KYC component system that uses token extensions. So there's a lot of really cool stuff getting built using token extensions.
Well, let's talk about the future a little bit now. So, in terms of what's coming up, you mentioned Blink's actions, like token extensions. Like, what are the trends in the consumer apps that you see like bubbling up for 2025 and like this also this year as well?
Yeah, so, I could say one of the really good things to see is that there are people finally building consumer-facing apps on Ethereum. Base has actually done a really good job pushing the Ethereum community to start product building user-centric applications. And so I think, Solana's been doing that for years, but like we don't get any credit for doing that on Solana. It's great to see people doing this on Ethereum now. And so my sense is that 2025 is going to be a much more user-centric application focused wave than the sort of hard tech, deep tech stuff we saw through most of 2023 and sort of the first half of 2024. This is probably good for the industry in general. This will probably change a lot of the dynamics. A lot of crypto OGs, I think, are going to be pretty annoyed when more people in crypto Twitter care about meme coins and NFTs and social apps and on-chain YouTube and things like that than care about like their DeFi liquidity optimization engine and the MEV bots and all these like very cool hard tech stuff they've built. But in some ways, that's actually what success looks like. That we start separating the hardcore builder level from the product builder level, right? And that these things become, sort of two separate pieces of the stack. And, just like today, the folks who are working on undersea fiber cables and engineers at Qualcomm and folks who are building, 5G technology and the chips that are in all of our laptops and even the laptops themselves, they're pretty far removed from the folks who are building Zoom, right? And let alone the folks who are building Instagram and TikTok and Twitter. And that is part of a healthy, vertically, diversified builder ecosystem. Right now, it's all kind of at the same level. Like, we kind of expect, superstar engineers and CTOs to be the leader of every type of product in crypto. And really, I think we need some more product focused people and some more business focused people building consumer facing applications on crypto rails as well.
Yeah, I mean, simple things like, for example, being able to buy a conference ticket with your crypto or being able to book a hotel with your crypto, something that gets people like me excited about the space.
Totally. And that's where like, Stripe and Visa are like quite exciting. PayPal too, like every one of those little like pay with PayPal buttons is going to be supporting PYUSD at some point. And, so we're getting there on those type of interfaces and applications, but it's going to be a little while, but I think folks see that you can transact anywhere from 1 penny to $100 million for $0.0025 per transaction. And that is super disruptive, right? Like FX markets are slow. They have high transaction fees comparatively. If you've ever sent money abroad, it's hard. If you get hosed on, foreign exchange conversion rates when you're, buying something on a credit card or debit card when you're abroad, that's rough. These are markets where the incumbents are getting very fat from fee structures. And anywhere that people are getting fat from fee structures, there's really, really interesting opportunities for new technologies to disrupt.
Yeah, I mean, the same way I think the kind of TransferWises of the world went up and started kind of managing that cross-border transactions. I think now
Yeah,
there's another wave of like crypto companies coming over and saying like, hey, now you can actually send real money that's stable on these rails that are cheaper, better, and faster. Like
totally.
ultimately, as a business, we want to accept crypto payments, right? But we want to do it in a way that's manageable for the finance department. Doesn't have to like run and the number of custom scripts in the back end to make sense of like the end of the month,
Right.
right?
I mean,
That's I think the vision.
I'm old enough to remember when Apple got up on stage and said they're going to charge 30% take rate on software sales, and they got a standing ovation for 4 minutes because the current take rate in the industry was 70% previously. And now today we look at Apple and Google with their 30% take rate and say that's exploitive, that's monopolistic. Um, your margin is someone else's opportunity is the only rule of capitalism.
Always. And like whenever there's more players, the margin decreases and the consumer ultimately wins.
Yeah.
Cool. So I am looking at time. I know we're at the end of our slot, so I want to say big thanks to you, Austin, for joining us, and for everyone that tuned in. The thing I like to do at the very end is like, is there a final thing you want viewers to check out? Any kind of announcements or things you want to plug before we sign off?
If you're going to be in APAC at all in September, you should come to Breakpoint. If you're not going to be in APAC, you should wake up early or stay up late and watch the live videos coming out of it. Breakpoint is the annual conference the Solana Foundation throws every year. It is always a wild ride of news announcements, like hardcore tech talks. And so that's my pitch. Is if you're going to be in Singapore for Token 2049 or F1, you should come to Breakpoint. If you're not, you should pay attention to what happens at Breakpoint. It's always interesting.
Come to Breakpoint. We'll be there. 100%. Cool. Awesome. Thanks again. And everybody, once again, if you haven't already, hit the like button, use the subscribe button on YouTube, follow us on X, LinkedIn, favorite podcasting platform, stay up to date with the latest episodes. We'll be back soon. And check out civic.com, learn more about what we do. Decentralized identity, tokenized identity, identity in general. We can help you solve your identity problems.